Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and today we're going to talk about why you should be excited to play Shadowlands just like I am, and you should listen to me because I'm wearing a tie, and that's a lot to ask for. So, Shadowlands is approaching fairly quickly, and I just want to take a few minutes to talk about why I'm stoked to play Shadowlands and why I'm excited for it, despite putting hours and hours and hours into the beta and already being able to play a lot of it and do a lot of testing. The more I test and the more that news that comes out, I'm just more and more excited to play, and I wanted to share those with you because I feel like some people might be on the fence, especially as we get closer to Shadowlands, because BFA's been dragging on for a very long time, and Blizzard announced that they are delaying the expansion until further notice. There are a lot of speculations out there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on in this video, so stay tuned if you're wondering what my thoughts might be about that. But we're going to dive right in. So first things first, one of the bigger reasons why I'm excited for Shadowlands is just the unpruning of a lot of abilities. A lot of classes lost their identity and they became these spec identities because a lot of abilities weren't shared along the entire class. And it felt pretty bad. If you were playing a Frost Death Knight and then you swapped to Unholy, you wouldn't have the same toolkit as you would as Frost. Now, while this isn't changing too drastically, they are bringing back some cool abilities like Anti-Magic Zone for Death Knight, respectively. They're also bringing back things like Eyes of the Beast, Poisons. They're bringing back different curses that Warlocks can apply. They're bringing a lot of like cool little intricate abilities that might not change your base rotation, but they allow you to make small changes or have a wider toolkit. So bringing a specific class to some kind of content just isn't as punishing as it was in the past, at least since I would say Warlord. So if you really enjoyed like Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, or even Cataclysm and Mist of Pandaria, because of the options you would have and the amount of buttons you were able to hit, that's slightly coming back. Now it's not going to it's not going to raise the skill ceiling for a certain specialization or a class or a player like it did in Mist of Pandaria, where if you were like really good at hitting your buttons in the right order, you would be tremendously above every other player who is also playing that same class or spec. But it's allowing you to have some variance in your rotation, and you have more answers to certain situations that you might have not had in the past. And just because of that alone, I'm very excited. That means that there isn't going to be as much as a specified meta as there was in especially BFA Season 3. So, or Season 4, I should say, like the end of BFA. Actually, all of BFA, fuck it. But because of that, I'm just excited to see what a lot of classes are going to be able to do and just experiencing it from like a role-playing perspective as well. Just something I'm really, really excited about. Second, I would say, so in the latest build, one of the latest builds that they did, they kind of released all of the trinkets, all the dungeon and raid trinkets that we're now able to test out. And I'm sure some of them are going to be buffed and some are going to be nerfed. But as of right now, there are so many trinkets to choose from. It's actually insane. And it feels good to have that option to be able to change trinkets between keys and runs and content you're doing. And a lot of them don't just come from raid, which is something that normally the really cool trinkets would come from raid, and using BFA as a comparison, a lot of the dungeon trinkets were fairly underwhelming, and you would typically prefer raid trinkets like the Razor Coral from Ajar's Eternal Palace, or the Lingering Psyche Shell from N'Zoth for a tank. And those cool effects are now being brought into the Mythic Plus scene as well. So a lot of the coolest trinkets right now are actually coming from Mythic Plus, which I guess the downside would be like you have to actually do different types of content. But what I like is there's so much cool options for you to have from different forms of content that might actually motivate you to do those certain things. And that alone I'm excited for. But on top of that, we're shifting away from this like Azerite power, obviously, and there's no tier sets available. So the gear that you get, a lot of what you're looking for is going to be within secondary stats. And with secondary stats not being that crazy important, just gear feels good just trying to get higher item levels of, or fishing out from different types of content. And unlike what we saw in N'Zoth's raid or in 8.3, so unlike what we've seen in BFA, where a lot of times the coolest things come from raid, you're now able to get them from several sources. And raid's going to not be that limiting either. The raid gear in past seasons and patches and tiers have been pretty much like there's a pair of boots and a pair of gloves that you can get, and if they're not in your stats, you're kind of screwed. Where now you're going to see more options from various different forms of content. And on top of that, you're also going to be able to get gear and transmogs from your respective covenant choice as well. So if you do choose a covenant because of just aesthetic, you're going to have the option to kind of gear out your character to look the way you want it to look, which I really, really like. Along with that, the customization options are great for all the characters, and I'm just super stoked to actually make my character look like how I want it to look. There's a lot of more, like a lot of the races that I like to play, like Worgen and Night Elf, have a lot more options, and it's just great to see, especially since we haven't really seen a lot of options since, like, I think Cataclysm was the last time they did a big update to the wardrobe. But the game just looks really polished. Like, you can see here, I'm sitting here on my Worgen warrior, and the gear just looks phenomenal. And despite this being obviously specific Covenant, I think all of the gear sets in some form or fashion look pretty good for some respective classes and armor specializations. And just playing through the world, I'll throw up some B-roll right now, playing through the world, you just get a feeling that the game just feels more polished and there's just a better engine that it's running on. So the game just feels good to play, which I think in itself could be the only point of this video, that it feels great to play. I should have started with this one, but that's just what I'm trying to get to, is that the game just feels really good. It feels well polished, it feels new, it feels exciting, and I think it's making a step in the right direction, trying to keep up with other MMOs in its respective genre. Coming to my fourth point, I think something that I'm really excited for is just dungeons and raids. Now, I don't talk a lot about what I do in this game, and most of you probably don't know what I do, but I mainly Mythic raid and do higher end Mythic Plus content. So I'm kind of used to this more elitist, I guess, perspective on the game, where I'm trying to min-max my character and my different specializations and perform at like a very high caliber. But outside of that, the raids just look clean and fun, and they're new and engaging. The contents of the raid look great. The fights all feel different so far, at least how it's looking. The aesthetic of the raid by itself alone deserves a huge round of applause to Blizzard's art team. They've definitely been carrying this expansion, despite there being some like bugs in the skybox, which I'm sure you might be able to see behind me in the background here. You actually might not be able to. They might have covered some of them up. But the art and the style of the raid just feel really good. Now, some of the fights still need a little bit more work, but you know, there's fights with lots of ad cleave. There's fights where really cool, interesting like teleportation mechanics. There's a lot of fights that are mainly designed as like a healer throughput, and like healers have to have a little bit more weight on their shoulders than they have been, right? Where instead of just using aura mastery when you need to at a certain time interval, the healers actually have to be conscious of what they're doing at certain points in their fight. And all of that together just make the raids and the raid design look really, really good. And I'm really hoping Blizzard gets their tuning right with a lot of the Covenant abilities and things of that sort, because if it's a broken system and it's tainted at the start, unfortunately, I think a really good raid is going to go to waste. Now, Blizzard is working on that, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But when it comes to dungeons, despite the dungeons being in a fairly linear fashion, I really like that style a little bit more than how some dungeons in BFA have been laid out. While not having as much of a linear style was good, and allowed people to create custom routes, eventually there would be a meta that would come, and a lot of times that would actually, you would be punished if you didn't bring a certain spec rogue or something that was able to just do a lot of damage, because it would be catered around doing really, really large pulls. So with the target cap and also linear dungeon styles, you get brought back to this Wrath of the Lich King-esque vibe, or like maybe like the heroic versions of Cataclysm dungeons when those came out, which were just hard dungeons to do. And because of the linear fashion, like, you have to go through the same thing that every other group does, and how you execute those pulls and the mechanics of each mob is just engaging. And it's something that you have to kind of be paying attention to. So if you like Mythic Plus and you've always enjoyed it, I think there's a lot to look forward to. And I'm just stoked to see the new dungeons and what kind of metas do come out of those and how the routes are being pulled. Because while they're, again, like, it is linear, there's options. There's still options, but it's now like you know, choose door 1, 2, or 3, and not just like go running wild through the park and figure out how to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. And that is what I'm excited for. So both of the forms of content are looking great. I can't speak on PvP. The new arena is really, really bright, and you have to kind of squint while looking at it, but I haven't gotten my feet wet in the arena yet on beta, but I'm sure it's going to look good. Which brings me to my last point. Now, my last point is Shadowlands was delayed. And I mentioned this at the start of the video, but I'm going to just kind of talk about it here. So, knee-jerk reaction, like Dratno said in his video. I wish you would notice me. Like Dratno said, though, it's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, but I want to play new content. I want to play the game. I'm tired of BFA. I want this shithole to be over. And while that's not the case, because it's being delayed, and BFA is going to persist for a few more months, or at least a few more weeks, at least a month probably, the pre-patch is coming out still at a relatively decent date, so you're able to jump in as a new player to be able to experience some of the new changes, the customization options, and the new pre-patch content. The them delaying it is a good thing, and it's a very, very good sign, especially from kind of an elite company like Blizzard. They haven't done this since Burning Crusade, which I'm sure a lot of people have beaten this horse to death, but I'm beating this dead horse again. That, they haven't done this in a long time, and them delaying the game is putting what they want their game to be and how they value their game, World of Warcraft, and what they see that the game's potential has. They just know it's not ready. And them delaying it means that their game's not ready, and they want to release the highest quality content before it's actually like just a shit show. Because while they might lose some subs right up front because people are mad that their game's not being released when they said it was going to be, it's better to have that player retention after it's released, because the game actually works and it feels good and like there's meaningful choices and the content is just well put together than just kind of having like a clusterfuck shit show of just random pieces that don't work, and there's constant tuning, and like you pick one option, you want to play, a certain rogue and a certain covenant, and all of a sudden, like a week later, all of a sudden your thing gets nerfed. Now you have this, you are being forced out of that covenant, essentially, is how you might feel. If you're a higher end player, you might not feel that way, because if you pick your covenant off of like the Venthyr set looks really good, I'm going to pick Venthyr. I mean, by all means, that might be the case, but some players don't think that way. And them delaying it is, I would say, like, there's obviously some downside, but I think overall it's great news. So that point alone just gets me so excited for Shadowlands, because they want it to be quality, which is, I think, what all Blizzard players want to see from the company that they've put so much of their life into. So those are the 5 reasons I'm excited for Shadowlands, and that's why I think you should play again. I am wearing a tie for this, so you should trust everything that I say. I do hope you guys enjoyed this. It was kind of just a little rant breakdown, but because I felt like it was important, especially during these times. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked this kind of content, or you like me wearing this tie, hit that subscribe button and that like button to let me know that you like content like this. And I hope you guys are having a great night, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.